Charging a high rate as a therapist is hard, right? There's no getting around it. There is so much guilt that comes up for therapists internally when we choose to charge a high rate. And that can be hard enough, right? As therapists, who are especially business owners in private practice, it is our job to work on our money mindset and to kind of process some of that and own it. But what happens when other therapists question your rate and put you down for charging a premium or place their limiting beliefs on you is so much harder. And this is something that I keep hearing coming up in coaching call after coaching call after coaching call inside of my VIP community for Private Practice Academy alumni. And so I wanted to do an episode on it today because I think that this really holds back so many therapists from success. This unfortunately has happened to me so many times in my career, right? I've gotten a lot of both like explicit messages and implicit messages that I shouldn't charge as much as I charge. I shouldn't make as much as money as I make, right? So, for example, comments on Instagram, I'm going to read you a few. It's awful people going into helping others for money. You don't need to be charging $275 an hour. It seems you only want to help the rich, not the hardworking class that needs help, but are also living paycheck to paycheck. I've gotten those comments enough times now that they don't really faze me anymore. But even going back through like my most recent reel that went viral where I was talking about income and seeing those comments, I'm like, shoot, I hate to read these, right? Like they still kind of sting a little. And so I think I get them more than most people because I'm talking about therapists making money on the internet. But I'm sure that you've gotten comments like that in your personal life, right? So, for example, when I was leaving the nonprofit that I was working at to go into private practice, I heard a lot of commentary from colleagues of, oh, Kelly's fancy now. Kelly's going to private practice to work with the rich people now, right? And it was a very different population that I was going to work with. Previously in nonprofits, I worked inside of like the homelessness service area. And so it was quite different, right? But something about like, oh, Kelly's going to private practice to work with the rich people now felt like I was doing something bad, right? It brought up all of this internal stuff. Of course, as a therapist, we want to help people. That's why we got into this profession, right? We didn't do it for the money, quote unquote, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't also make money because it's our career, it is our profession, it's our job, right? Like helping people doesn't pay the bills, helping people doesn't buy a home, helping people doesn't pay for a vacation or pay for your kids' tuition. You can't do those things with good intentions, right? You need actual cash dollars because we live in a capitalist society. So, I think this also brings up the question of like, am I making therapy inaccessible, right? What if my clients can't afford me? Is it my responsibility to lower my rate? Is it the right thing to do? Will my clients be mad if I raise my rates again this year, right? These are all the questions that have been in my own head from time to time during my private practice journey and that I hear therapists struggling with every single day. And I think that all of these fears, all of these beliefs, whether they're coming from other people or they're coming from you, really stem from like a deep-seated belief that a lot of us probably have that charging a high rate is greedy or charging a high rate is unethical. And to be honest, I used to believe this, right? Thank God I have done the money mindset work to combat this, but I definitely have held this belief before. And it makes sense. Number one, so many therapists are women, right? And as women, we are conditioned in society to believe that our value as professionals is less than, right? Across the board, helping professionals held by women are paid less than helping professionals held by men, right? And so there's all the societal conditioning that comes into play about how women should desire money, how we should receive money, how we should act around money. Another thing that really comes into it is, people on the internet are quite mad. So I think that there's a big fear of judgment and rejection from our peers, from our clients, right? A lot of people on the internet, they hide behind a keyboard and they feel really brave to say things that they would never say to somebody's face in person, right? And so you are getting the most harsh, unfiltered thoughts from people when you're like having something go viral in a negative way. And so I think reading through those comments can really bring up a lot of fear, even if you're not the one posting the content. Let's say that you're reading through my own Instagram comments, you might start to fear that this is how my colleagues perceive me, right? But they just wouldn't say it to my face. And I think that it comes down to like, that might be how they see themselves, right? A lot of that is internalized. And I know for me, it hurts a lot more coming from other therapists. It hurts more to get those comments from other women, from other helping professionals, from other therapists, than it does from people who are seeking therapy and maybe are having a hard time accessing it. Because it feels like out of everybody, therapists should get it the most, right? Therapists should know how long it takes to become a therapist, how hard we work, how expensive that process is, how much continuing education goes into it, how much emotional labor goes into caring for our clients, how unrealistic it is to serve 40 clients a week well, right? How making $275 an hour does not mean that a full caseload is whatever 275 times 40 is. Like, that's not how much you're making per week, right? I think too, like being labeled as unethical by other therapists is also super, super hard for myself and for others, because obviously we all care about our clients and would never want to do something unethical or harmful to them. That is literally my worst nightmare. And so when people throw around the word unethical because a therapist is charging a higher fee, it really stings, and it really makes you pause and question, am I allowed to do this? And you are allowed to do this. You are absolutely allowed to charge a fee that feels good for you and that works for you and your family. Okay, so now that we are kind of on the same page about why this is hard and why this sucks so much to have other therapists question you, to question your rates, I want to talk about what we can do internally to work on that money mindset. First off, I think with anything, right, is acknowledging the issue. This is a difficult and nuanced issue. There's no getting around it. Yes, charging $250 per session means that many people will not be able to afford to work with you. And that is the reality of our healthcare system in the United States. And it is not your responsibility as an individual therapist to fix that, right? Across the board, we could decide to pay therapists more. Therapists are the most underpaid healthcare workers in the entire industry, right? Out of all of our equivalent peers who have master's level degrees and do thousands of hours of supervised experience, we are the lowest paid field. And so that is not our job to take on as individual therapists, right? We are allowed to say the rates that insurance companies have set do not work for me, and I'm a highly skilled professional and I'm going to charge a higher rate, right? You are absolutely allowed to do that. It's also important to recognize that this idea, this belief that no one will be able to afford that is a limiting belief. It is not a fact. One, there are plenty of people in this country who make a very good living the same way that you would like to and have, plenty of finances to be able to afford $1,000 a month for therapy. I know that that is very undoable for a lot of people in America, but it is also very reasonable and very doable for, a large portion as well. Now, that doesn't mean that your entire caseload has to be quote unquote rich people who can afford $1,000 a month out of pocket. I have worked with countless teachers, nurses, grad students. I've worked with custodians. I've worked with other therapists, right? I've worked with healthcare professionals. There are plenty of people who work jobs that are regular jobs that are not super high paying. Usually, honestly, for the government, they have really great benefits too, who have good out of network benefits, right? Whose insurance company is willing to say, okay, we are willing to pay therapists in network X amount. But if you see a therapist or another specialty provider who's not in our network, who hasn't agreed to our rates, we will reimburse you for 80% of the cost, let's say, right? People have insurance plans that will do that. Regular middle class income people, right? And so that is also a really like positive option that a lot more people may be able to afford to work with you at a high premium rate than you would think. People have flexible spending accounts. People have health savings accounts, right? And people are happy to use these things to work with the right people. It's also really helpful for you to understand the unique value that you bring to your clients and to really, really believe that your services as a therapist are worth that amount. One of the biggest things that was helpful for me in doing this was actually seeing a therapist who charged at the time as much as I charge. Now she charges more than I charge. She charges $300 per session. And that has been such a game changer for me in not feeling like I'm taking advantage of my clients or it's unreasonable or they must be resenting me or they must be, like questioning if that session was worth that amount, because I go and I see my therapist and I have such a positive experience and I feel so helped. I feel so seen. And I feel very grateful to be paying her $300 because it's helping me, right? There's no part of me that's like, dang, I wish that I, went to Target instead. I'm like, that was so helpful. I'm so glad that I did that, right? And so prior to that, I was seeing therapists who were in network with my insurance, and I was going through, like, I probably saw 4 therapists in like a 2 or 3 month period trying to find somebody I liked. And it was really hard, right? Like, I had really negative experiences. I'm not saying that that's true for everybody who takes insurance, but I had therapists who like could not figure out the telehealth thing, and I could only see them from the eyebrows up during our session. Obviously, super unreasonable. You want to be able to see your therapist's face. I had a therapist who, like, when I told her I was a therapist and I was talking about some work related stress, like, spent the entire rest of the session asking me, how do I get out of network clients? How do I do this whole Instagram thing? And I really felt like I was taking care of her at that point, right? I had therapists who were like much older than me and just like did not understand at all what I was talking about. I had a therapist who was like very much just like, oh, well, CBT, so we don't need to do anything. You know what to do, like kind of giving me like a face when I was talking about my anxiety. Not super helpful, right? Like that feels very judgmental. And so for me to kind of go from like those negative experiences to like actually working with a therapist who was highly skilled, who got me, who really was helpful, I was super happy to pay that amount of money. I really understood the unique value that she was bringing me. Something else that's helped me, like as a therapist, has been I save in my iPhone a folder of all the nice emails I've gotten over the years from therapy clients. And that is just so helpful when I'm having like a shitty day or I'm having imposter syndrome or I'm questioning myself or I'm feeling stuck with a client, to really remind myself and look back and see, yeah, I'm really helping people here. People are really enjoying working with me. People are really changing their lives. They're feeling much less anxious. They're having relationships for the first time and kids and getting married and all of this. And it's just like a beautiful thing and is why I do this work. And so saving that somewhere that I can revisit it is so nice. I keep all of my nice DMs and comments in a folder too, even for like business coaching stuff. It's so nice to be able to look back on. So definitely recommend doing that if you have not already. Something else that we can do kind of like internally to work on this money mindset work is acknowledge that our clients have personal autonomy, right? People want choice in the therapist they see. They want to be able to choose the specialty. They want to be able to choose, if you're a man or a woman, your race, maybe your ethnic background. They want to be able to choose your personality. They want to choose an office decor that vibes with them. They want to choose scheduling options that work for them. They want to choose a vibe that feels like, positive to them, whether that is calming, whether it is funny and lighthearted, whether it is call you on your BS kind of vibe. They want choice when seeing a therapist. And people can choose to pay you if they can afford it, of course, right? But you are not forcing anybody to work with you, right? And I think that acknowledging that choice is so, so, so helpful. Um, you know, I think in general, we are all better therapists when we are seeing less clients and are less financially stressed. And so people will probably have an easier time finding somebody with their preferences when they're looking out of network, right? There's more availability because people with insurance are very limited. There's very few therapists who take insurance these days. And so, it can be hard to find somebody if you're looking in network. When you look out of network, you do get a lot more flexibility with the therapists that you want to see, how present they are in session, what specific modality they use. You just get more empowered to be able to handpick somebody. I think it's also really, really, really important to take protecting your time and energy seriously. I read a stat the other day that about 1 out of 4 clinicians in the United States are considering leaving healthcare primarily due to burnout. That is ridiculous, right? That is a serious risk of you losing your career because you're not taking care of yourself. Like, we as therapists need to do better. We need to prioritize ourselves. Like, if 1/4 of therapists left the field, then therapy would truly become inaccessible because there wouldn't be enough therapists to help the people who need it, right? And so it's super important that you take taking care of yourself seriously, that your caseload feels sustainable, that the work you're doing feels manageable. Obviously, do the math based off your age, but I'm 32. I want to be able to be doing this work for at least the next 20 years. It's important that you consider that, right? That you are not just hustle, grind, grind, grind. I can see, 20 clients, 30 clients, 40 clients a week for the rest of my life, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. You are going to burn out. And, you know, I think we see this all the time. I can think back on so many colleagues who've left the field, or pursued stuff that was like non-client facing work, even if they're still like kind of in the social work realm, because it really does weigh on you, right? And so if you want to be a clinician, if you want to be practicing as a therapist for the rest of your career, for the long haul, you're going to need to do things quite differently, right? You are going to need to charge a higher rate. You are going to need to see less clients every single week. It's also really important to understand the basics of business, finance, taxes, money. I know that numbers make a lot of people kind of cringe and they want to shy away from it, but it is really important that you know this stuff. First off, you can make a boatload of money as a therapist, especially on Instagram. I want to acknowledge that you can make a ton of money seeing one-on-one therapy clients if that's what you desire. And charging $250 per hour does not mean that that is what you take home. It is also important to understand that reality. You need to understand what your expenses are as a business owner. You need to pay taxes. You don't get paid time off, right? So you need to account for that. You need to account for vacation. You need to account for sick leave. There's a lot of work that you do that's unpaid, right? Your notes, your marketing, your networking, right? You should take that all into account. And you should set the high rate, like $250 per session, that gives you the quality of life you want when you take all of those things into consideration. Maybe 250 is enough. Maybe you need to go higher to 300 to 350. Or maybe, you're able to go lower to 150, 175, 200. But you should do some math and really understand, okay, how many client hours do I feel is sustainable for me for the long haul, right? How much paid time off do I need to take care of sick kids, to go on vacation, to travel, to have a mental health day when I need it? How much do I have to pay in taxes? How much are my expenses for running my business? How many other hours of work do I have to do per week? And then really set your rate accordingly. I also want you to make decisions on how you will handle things that come up financially with clients. So that way you're not deciding from a place of emotion or from guilt. And instead you are deciding in advance from like a grounded place as a business owner. So I definitely do not recommend having any sliding scale spots until your own personal financial needs are taken care of. But once you're at a place where your business can afford to do that, if you would like to give back in that way, I think that it is a great thing to do. You don't have to, right? I personally don't have any sliding scale spots at this time. I'd rather give money to charity than give time because I'm pretty limited on the amount of time that I have extra in my life to work, right? So you do not have to have sliding scale spots, but if you want them, you totally can. I suggest picking a specific number, right? I think that that is super important to not just go by feeling, to not just be on an intro call and be like, oh, but this person really needs it and it sounds like I could really help them. pick a limited number of sliding scale spots to have in your practice and offer them. And when they're gone, refer out, right? It's also important to consider, will you work with your sliding scale clients forever? Or is it going to be time limited so you can serve more people in that capacity? What will you do if their income increase? What will you do if a current client has like a drastic change in financial circumstances? Will you offer them a temporary sliding scale? For how much will you charge? How many of those do you have the ability to offer, right? Maybe something, God forbid, like COVID happens again, where a lot of people lose their job at once. How can you handle that, right? How long will you allow clients to be on a sliding scale? It is really important to just know some of those answers. Maybe the COVID thing, for example, is like unpredictable, but you know, you should know your general plan of how much you want to make per week, per month, per year, whatever. And then how much capacity do you have to do sliding scale within that, if that's something that you desire to do. Because if not, what ends up happening is we are reactive, right? Our client tells us they lost their job and we immediately want to jump in and fix it and say, oh, by the way, I can lower my rate for X amount if you need. And they may not even need it. They might have 6 months of severance, right? We have no idea what their deal is. And so you really kind of need some internal policies for how you handle that stuff. Okay, so let's go to the next stage of this episode. How do we respond when other therapists actually bring up and question your rate? Now, first off, it probably will not come up as much as you think. So when you're online and you see therapists commenting like that, right, you internalize that. But there is no reason that you have to be shouting your rates from the rooftop as an individual therapist, the way that I do, or the way that you see other business coaches do on the internet, right? There's no need for it. Yes, sometimes this will still come up. Maybe when you're networking, maybe when you're talking to colleagues, maybe when someone's like picking your brain about how you went into private practice, right? You might get some comments maybe from friends or family members or whoever, but you are not going to get them nearly as much as you might fear that you will, because you're just not going to be talking about money in like such a public space to that many people. As an individual therapist, there's no need for it. I do think that it is really, really important though to develop a thick skin and learn to ignore the negativity. And that's where that like first half of the episode about the money mindset stuff really comes in, of knowing and understanding and truly believing that you deserve this, that you are able and allowed to charge whatever it is that you want to charge. I think makes it a lot easier to ignore the negative comments and really know that they're coming from a place of like envy or jealousy. It might be coming from a place of like self-righteousness or even saviorism, right? If other therapists are putting so much emotional energy into what you're charging, something is getting deeply triggered in them. And just acknowledging that has always been really, really helpful for me. Now, I think it's helpful to respond to that criticism with grace and professionalism. So, like, I would never say to a colleague, like, oh, it sounds like your saviorism's being triggered, right? Like, that's just throwing fuel on the fire. But if I was in a networking call with somebody and they were like, oh my gosh, you charge $250 per session, like, I will never be able to refer a client to you. Like, no one can afford that. I would say like, oh, that hasn't been my experience, but I will definitely keep you in mind as a referral source for anyone who might need it. Like, remind me what insurance you take again, right? Just, we can deflect, we can acknowledge, we can offer to provide them a referral if it comes up. But you do not need to try and convince them otherwise. You do not need to defend yourself. You do not need to get deep into their issues or their money mindset or their belief. We can just kind of let it go. And this is where having the right community and the right support is so important, because there are so many therapists out there who will do the exact opposite. Who, when you tell them your rate, when you tell them you charge, let's say $250 per session, they will hype you up. They will cheer you on. They will push you to charge more. They will celebrate your financial wins. They will say, that's amazing. How did you do that? Please tell me. I want that. That has major goals, right? You need to get in those rooms. You need to get in those rooms where people believe and understand the worth of therapists. and stop hanging out on the corners of the internet in Facebook groups where people are mad to see a therapist earning a good living, right? That is one of the things that I love most about the VIP community for Private Practice Academy alumni is that everybody there is one, on board with therapists marketing themselves on Instagram, and two, on board with therapists making a ton of money, charging a premium private pay rate. And at the end of the day, you are going to take on the beliefs of those around you, no matter how much you don't want to. It is only natural, right? We know this as therapists. And that's why it matters so much what rooms you're in. It matters so much who you surround yourself with. It matters so much what you show your brain is possible for you, what you show your brain that success can look like. And so please get in the corners of the room or the corners of the internet, and so please surround yourself with people in person, online, who believe that therapists should make a ton of money, who believe that we are highly skilled, highly trained professionals who are doing absolutely life-changing work and deserve to be paid accordingly. Now, to wrap up, I shared in the beginning that I noticed this question coming up for a lot of therapists in my VIP community lately, which is really what inspired me to share this episode with you today in case you're struggling with this too. Because it is just my life mission to make sure that therapists understand and believe and know how to make more money. You are allowed to charge whatever you want to charge. That doesn't make you unethical. It doesn't make you greedy or selfish, although you are allowed to be greedy and selfish, right? If you want to be greedy and selfish, you can absolutely do that. But charging a premium does not in and of itself make you greedy and selfish. At the end of the day, literally nothing bad happens when women make more money. In fact, so much good happens when women make more money. There's so much good that we can do with it in the world for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, for our communities, right? And so I really want each of you who are listening to this to question your fee, but question it from a place of, is this enough? Is this what would really make me happy? Or am I operating from a place of fear of judgment and fear of putting myself out there or fear of being successful? And is that holding me back? Is there actually room for me to charge more to improve my quality of life, to improve my financial circumstances? Because I am all about therapists getting that bag, as the Gen Z would say. Okay, friends, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. I am cheering you on always. If you get the haters who question your rate, please DM me. I will happily give you a friendly slap back into reality that you have every single right to do this. And I'm just so proud of you for doing this work and pursuing a different career as a therapist, fighting burnout, and really trying to be the best therapist that you can be. Talk to you soon.